So welcome back, everybody, to our 12-part special collaboration between Thrive Mortgage and Social Strategies and, of course, Homemade Austin. I am Brian Hurd with Build by Thrive. With me, as always, is my good friend, Natalie Roberts. Trusty sidekick. And, of course, the one and only Melissa Nice Warner Daily with Homemade Austin. So thank you all for being here as we continue our discussion on the road home and understanding the paths to and from homelessness. To that end, we've got two really special guests here. And Melissa, why don't you do the honors?
Yes, I'm so excited to have these gentlemen in the studio. We have Chris Baker with the Other Ones, and we have Derick Zornaman with the Austin Disaster Relief Network. And so I'm going to let them tell a little bit about themselves. Chris, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having us on the, I guess, not very maiden voyage, but second of the road home.
We broke it in a little bit for you.
Yeah.
Good. I appreciate that. So my name is Chris Baker. I'm the founder and executive director of the Other Ones Foundation. And we are a homelessness service nonprofit that focuses on a couple of things. Primarily, one is extremely low barrier in work opportunities. Another is case management and housing navigation services. Humanitarian aid in a whole bunch of different forms, primarily in the form of hygiene stations that we take all over the city of Austin. And then lastly, we're the primary service provider and service coordinator for a roughly 200 resident state sanctioned homeless encampment in Southeast Austin, where we are working on building a large transitional complex that will act as a sort of new approach to emergency shelter in the homeless response system.
Jeez, got a lot going on.
Amazing.
And Derick, what about you?
Speaking of a lot going on.
Speaking of it.
So my name is Derick Zwerneman. I'm the church development director for the Austin Disaster Relief Network. That means that I work with churches. And so even organizations like Chris's, we focus on serving outside of disaster so that when a disaster actually happens, we can come together and support the community in a great way. So our mission is to glorify Christ by equipping, empowering a network of churches to respond to the physical, emotional, and physical needs in times of disaster. So you can imagine that encompasses a lot of things, but it's incredible to work with, over 200 churches in this local area. It's growing all the time. And we actually have a national program where now we've trained many other cities to build their own network. And it's just a great resource for the city.
And you have a side gig too, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'd call it a side gig, but I'm a 24-year Austin firefighter. About 12 years ago, I broke my foot really bad, and I went to communications where I could keep up a shift job where I could work a couple days on, a couple days off. And I went to dispatch, which is at the Emergency Operations Center. So my world's kind of collided because on my days off before, I was the outreach pastor for a large church here called Celebration Church. Yep. And so I did that for 9 years. And so if you can imagine pastor at a church doing outreach and then a firefighter, I just kind of understood this world and it made sense to me. So now I work to actually work with a national group through the ARC. It's called the Association of Related Churches. And we're helping to train churches all around the country and building networks there. So it's a pretty unique world. I have 3 kids and an incredible wife. So
well, it's a beautiful thing when it all comes together, when your two passions meld into one.
Well, and I know you've got some questions asked, but I love kind of hearing the origin story, so to speak. And, so thank you for sharing, Derick. What about you, Chris? How did you get involved in all of this?
Well, let me just ask first, is foot injury a normal pathway to communications?
We want fire. You become a firefighter so that you can fight fires and help people out on the streets. And, but yeah, that's a good place to go to heal.
It's a good place to go to heal.
So, to answer the question, I could tell the story of how I got involved in this field and take up the entire 45 minutes or an hour that we have here today. So I'll really just to really kind of give you the real 500,000 foot up view of kind of what happened with me is that I graduated college in 2008. And if you recall, that was not exactly the best time in the world to be entering into the job market. And I was able to get a job working overnights at a homeless shelter. I had some experiences. I had some substance use disorder in my past and had wound up, in brief periods of time without a place to stay. And I kind of got into it that way. And over time, I kind of was in and out of the field for many years. And before I started the Other Ones Foundation, I was working for another organization, and I had and I still have some sort of fundamental disagreements with the way that the homelessness response system works. And not to say that the people that work in that system aren't doing a great job, but I thought that there was some ways that we could maybe do things a little bit differently. And I just sort of pursued that passion. And I come from, from my very early days, I was very into like punk rock music and hardcore, and that's like a whole world where you just do it yourself. And so I've never been afraid to just not ask permission and just go out and do it. And so I learned a lot over the time that I worked for other agencies and got a lot of relationships. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's sort of like the one side of it, but really what it comes down to is that I see a very distinct need that is ever present, that's with our brothers and sisters who find themselves living on the streets. And it's just something that I have a very, very difficult time not doing something about.
Well, and I think you have a little bit more of a right to actually disagree, what have you, with the way the homelessness problem is being handled, because you're getting off your butt and doing something about it, and I think that's the problem is so many of us like to complain about it, but we don't get off our butts and do anything about it. So yeah, my hat's off to you.
Today, we are talking about natural disasters. I think, when most people think of homelessness, they think you just kind of like wake up one day and end up on the streets. And as we all well know, these are years and years of trauma, addiction, all the different causes layered on top of one another. But I feel like natural disasters is one of those very few things that can end somebody up unhoused very quickly and overnight. And we really want to hear from y'all firsthand what it was like, working with your clients and the people you serve during the winter storm Uri,
which I did not know
we
that
have
was
many
the
names
name.
for it.
Yeah.
I've never called it by its proper name, so it's the first.
Snowpocalypse works.
Yes.
Yeah.
That might have been a misprint on my update sheet here. No,
We're changing
I believe
the
it is
narrative.
Yuri, though. I looked it up. I Googled it. So
I believe
there
you're
we go.
right. Yeah.
But if you wanted me to start a little bit, working as a firefighter, of course, in communications, I'm sitting there taking the calls over and over again with families. And you've got elderly, you've got single moms, you've got families with a father at home that just don't know what to do. And it was really hard we had 12, 14 call takers, firefighters on the lines, and we've got 25 calls waiting. We're just going from one worst day to the next over and over again for hours and hours. And so I'm sitting there translating this and, oh my gosh, there's going to be a lot of people that need help. And, one of the first things that we were able to do is to set up warming shelters with the city. And that's one of the things that we typically do is to help, work in conjunction with the Red Cross. In this case, for some reason, Red Cross was shorthanded, and we ended up helping open 2 of the city shelters. And then there were 10 churches that opened their doors to be shelters. From there, we went into the next mode, because our team is actually, I don't know if y'all know how this works, but there's they call it the EOC. So the Emergency Operations Center. And this is where everybody is to make decisions. So Juan Ortiz, who is our emergency management director for the city of Austin, is basically running this room with the fire department, police department, sheriff department, water works, gas companies, everybody's in that room. And so it came up that, wow, we've got people stuck and we can't even get a fire truck to them. we can't even get emergency services out. And so the idea came that maybe we should make a call out for 4x4 trucks to go help people. And would you believe that over 1,160 volunteers
Wow.
said, I've got a 4x4 truck and I'll go pick people up and take them
Just
to
like
warming
Houston.
shelters.
Yeah, just like the hurricane. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that Cajun
Awesome.
Navy right here in
Yeah,
Austin, Texas,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
And
love
so,
it. I hadn't
so the
heard
cool
that.
thing is about that is that, you know, through the warming shelters, I know there was a big, you know, we've got a large homeless population. Obviously, that's why we're all here today. And there was a lot of those folks that were living in tents, trying to just make it out there to get to warming shelters. And so that was some of the operations that we had. Now, if we look at today versus, you know, day 2, 3 of the storm and, you know, evacuating people, we're now in kind of a recovery and a rebuild mode. And we do have over 358 families were displaced because of broken pipes in their homes, because they had no water, no electricity. I think we're down now to 233 that we're working with, that we call it shepherding. We engage our network of churches to be able to walk with these survivors. And we are finding that some just don't know what their next step is, because as Chris knows, and as y'all probably know, is that there's a disaster in a lot of homes every day. And just because there isn't a major winter storm or a hurricane or a tornado coming through, they're on the brink, right? I mean, it could take one paycheck and they're on the streets.
Yeah.
And so just think about the time that we just went through and realize that now it's just been times 20. And so that's the thing that we're looking at now and how we're helping with that long-term recovery.
What about you, Chris? I mean, how was it like for, I know for the majority of us, we lost power and, you know, heat and water or whatever, but for people who already didn't have a whole lot or anything at all, I mean, how was it helping our unhoused neighbors?
Yeah, so it was intense, and I want to talk real quickly just kind of about some of the other efforts that we saw. We saw a lot of really amazing efforts. We saw the community come together in a big way, like Derick pointed out about this 1,160 people showing up with 4x4 trucks. You know, that's a really I saw a lot of stuff like that happen also. So you know, I have to give a lot of credit to a lot of there these sort of small nonprofits and autonomous organizations that kind of came together. We saw Austin Mutual Aid, the Austin Resiliency Trust, Survive to Thrive Foundation, and a whole gang of other organizations get together and raise money and provide transportation to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds collectively of people experiencing homelessness, getting them into hotels. Yeah. And so that was a huge, massive effort that I have never seen anything quite like it. And I was really honored to be sort of called in to help coordinate some of those efforts. And so that was a big community-wide thing. And, you know, to your point about the people with the pickup trucks, I saw a thing that I kept reading everywhere, and it speaks volumes about the generosity and resiliency of Texans. Is if you the instructions that I kept seeing around were if your car is damaged while you're driving around in the winter storm and you get stuck, just pull over to the side, turn your flashers on, give it about a half an hour, and 2 guys in a big ass pickup truck are going to come by with a case of Budweiser and pull you out of there. And don't worry about giving a tip. They totally live for this stuff. So I love that thought, because it just really speaks volumes, you know, to me, just about the way that we all came together and we're treating each other. Now, what the Other Ones Foundation, obviously, we're charged with, we've got also our own thing, you know, and we're one of the things that we do is we send out big work crews every day. So we have all these vans and trailers and trucks and stuff. So all of our equipment got swept up in this effort. But then we also have you know, we have a site that we're providing services on, where there's a couple of hundred people who are essentially living still homeless, right? Because we haven't completed a construction project there yet, and so most people are living in tents. we did manage to open up a 24-hour shelter space. We opened up a big warming station. We kind of like we're able to open up an old building and get some diesel heaters in there. And in those times of emergency, we want to be able to, we always want to be able to offer people things that are like clean and dignified, but we were in an emergency situation. And so we did whatever we had to do to get warmth into places. Now you can't make anybody go. And because of that, we, on our site, we saw 1 fatality. I know that community wide, we saw no less than 3 fatalities, simply because people don't have 4 walls and an HVAC system. And it is really, that's kind of, in my opinion, that's criminal, and it really highlights this fact that we all had to deal with this issue of not having electricity and not having water. For most of us, not all, I know that some people had much, much worse experiences than others, but for most people, there was a power outage and maybe it lasted a couple of days, and that's terrible. We run out, or the water went off and maybe that lasted a couple of days. But we have to remember that our brothers and sisters that have no place to live, that have no house, live without these things 365 days a year. And while a winter storm of the magnitude that we saw is something that we weren't necessarily prepared for, you have to remember that the thing that we are prepared for is the heat in the summer. And so like I'm from New York originally, and people who I know up there, blows their minds that like we had this much ice on the roads and everything shut down. But if they had 40 days in a row of temperatures of 110 and 115, they wouldn't be prepared for that either. As in Texas, we're prepared for that. But you have to remember that all the people that are living out on the streets, they're in the same position, whether it's heat, snow, rain, sleet. And the real crime to me is that the house, like the houselessness, means that you don't have what your primary struggle a lot of the time is going to be keeping this dwelling that you're in, whatever it is, whether it be a tent or under an overpass or some sort of structure that you've built out of whatever materials you could find. Those structures themselves aren't very resilient. They don't keep things warm. They don't keep things cool. And when these weather events happen, they get damaged. And when you've got people who are constantly struggling to keep some sort of shelter around them, how do you ever expect that person to do the things necessary to get up out of that situation without a lot of help, and so that's one of the things that I think we really need to be focusing on when we're thinking about the solutions on the solution side of things. It's we need people to have access to physical structures that make it so that there's some ability to gain some traction and not just keep spinning the wheels because you've got to fix your tent again.
It's a basic human right.
Correct. Yes, indeed.
Well, and I think one of the things that surprised me the most, both during and after, is, the plight of those without homes really had very little attention. In fact, I can probably count on my hands the amount of news stories I saw, and the most obvious was when one of them finally caught on fire, and it caused an issue for traffic. And I think it's kind of heartbreaking that isn't. I don't want to say not media worthy, but it was really surprising that more attention wasn't brought to, people that, we're worried about not having HVAC and all that,
Right.
but we still have walls around us, we still have food and non-perishables and all that kind of stuff. So many people had nothing.
And even if we didn't, we had a sense of, or we have community that we came together to get that. So I think it's a great
Correct.
point. And, Chris, to your point, one of the resounding themes that we're hearing as we go through our podcast series are the 2 basic foundations: a home, community. And those 2 things begin to lift our brothers and sisters off the street. So when it came to the storm, you're right, Brian. I don't believe I saw much coverage when it came to that. Hearing from Chris and Derick on the outpouring is, I think, a positive.
Exactly.
But in that, Derick, you mentioned 250 families are still displaced. Curious, real quick, as to, can we go to a website to, as a community, help with those families in particular? And Chris, with the continued efforts, how are you resolving that as we go into the post cleanup?
Yeah. So our website, of course, is adrn.org. You can go there and learn about what we do and be able to contribute to that cause. Now, as far as, homelessness, we're looking at and mostly dealing with families that had a home, right? I mean, a lot of things that Chris works with are folks that are out on the street. These are guys and girls that I take calls from and actually take the call of the tent that's on fire from the fire department. Mm-hmm. So, there definitely is, that's a challenge. I mean, it's, I don't know if it's even, helping those folks with how to build a safe fire, because I mean, fact of the matter is that we also get calls from concerned citizens saying, hey, why are the people even being able to start a fire underneath that thing? Well, because, they need to stay warm, Right. I mean, so that's the give and take. That's the challenge. I'm listening to Chris and thinking that we've got, we're working with organizations from all around the country. There's one called 8 Days of Hope. They come in for 8 days, help rebuild homes that have been, demolished by natural disasters. Chris, we need to talk after this. Maybe that we can come in, because I think it's going to happen.
There you go.
In a couple of months, we're going to have 8 Days of Hope, and the idea is that we'll be able to rebuild 200 homes. So maybe there's a couple tiny homes that we can build while we do that. So
I think we all need to talk after this.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, guys, this is a real deal. I mean, we all see it every day. A lot of folks, I'm very close to it because I used to work down at MLK and Oasis at Station 2 for 6 years, and homelessness is real. I mean, it's something that we can't, and this is the thing that we talk about. I host a bi-monthly outreach pastor. So these are the leaders in churches that actually lead initiatives to help the community, right? And so we always want to know what's the biggest need in the city? Well, how can we come together and help meet a need? And so I know homelessness is one that's always a topic, and we work with Alan Graham over at Community First, but there's also the group that just drives by and goes, oh, those people again, I honestly, my daughter drives a little Jeep, and I'm like, hey, if you're going through this part of town, I want you to keep your doors on, and so that's a challenge, and so how do we, my question always is, how do we educate people in general about homelessness? How do we, because the thing that I see is that most are not there. Well, I don't know, Chris can probably correct me, but by choice. There are circumstances that happen along the way. And, we talk about families that are on the brink. Something happened to where they went from I live somewhere to I'm now on the street. And so, that's our heart is, as people who care or about this, it's like, man, what can we do? And so I love organizations like Chris's, and we come in after a disaster, and we have intake centers where families can come through, individuals can come through, and basically they're sat down and we walk them through CISM, which is critical incident stress management. And so that stress management, we ask some questions, we don't ask other questions. I mean, if you can only imagine, if you start telling people, well, I've been there before, that's a horrible thing to say. It's like, hey, tell me about your story. I want to hear, what happened to you, and just let them talk a little bit. Right. I mean, I'm sure Chris knows this stuff, but the fact of the matter is, through that conversation, you're going to learn about how you can help them the best.
Absolutely.
And so as a community, I think that's probably one of the greatest things that we can do is discover how can we help the best? How can we support organizations like Chris's that's getting on the ground, and actually doing something about it.
I think it's always the most novelist of concepts that we become so far detached from, like just asking somebody how they're doing, like making somebody feel seen or heard. It's just that human connection we've become so detached from nature and people. And it is that first outreach, just talking about trauma, we said that's the first thing is the outreach is just asking somebody, have you eaten and how did you sleep? Just the basic necessities.
Well, that's a really good point, because I mean, in myself included, but if you think about it, how many people did you call during that winter storm just to say, hey, you doing okay? And I admit I probably didn't call nearly enough people, and it's just that simple, I make assumptions that, oh, they're going to be fine or whatever. But what if they're going, I mean, I went through it with my family. What if you're going through that by yourself? I mean, I couldn't imagine it, And you're right.
Checking in on
Just
each
checking
other.
in. Just checking in.
That's a great point. And that I think gets to, I want to respond to a couple of things that I heard. It really gets to the point to me about this sort of difference between homelessness and houselessness. You can get somebody inside a place, like obviously like a lack of a place to live is what causes houselessness, but what causes homelessness is a lack of family, a lack of a support network, and
That's a good point.
a community that people care about, and a community that cares about people, and so that therefore those people can then care about the community.
Yeah.
That's a thing that's lacking all over the place. And I'll tell you what, and this is something that you may hear from another local nonprofit leader a lot, which is that we've got people who are living out in Lakeway in $1 million houses who are homeless and will continue to be homeless. And that is a fact. And so, like, when we talk about homelessness as sort of a monolithic thing, I think there's a lot to kind of unpack there, right? And so we think of these things, when I go and do talks in front of groups, I always ask these. I always start by asking the question of the group, what is the cause of homelessness? And it's actually a really easy sort of like parlor trick, because I know what people are going to say. I know that they're going to say substance use disorders or drug addiction, alcoholism. They're going to say loss of job, and they're going to say mental illness. Yep. And I always say in these things, I say, all right, I want everybody to close your eyes right now and think about somebody that who has lost a job, somebody that who lives with a mental illness, or somebody that who has a substance use disorder, whether an alcoholic or a drug addict. And I'm sure that everybody, all you guys over there, probably even there, you're all thinking of somebody that And so I say, raise your hand when you've thought of someone. And inevitably, every person in the room raises their hand. And I say, now keep your hand in the air if that person is homeless. And almost all of the hands go down.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Great point.
So I think that really, you're right when you say that I think the driver, what Alan Graham calls the superhighway, is a lack of family and a lack of a support network. And it's not always doesn't have to be biological family, a chosen family.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things that we try to do. And that's like the sort of gold lace that interlace through all of our programs. It's really the magic and the meat and potato of the things that we do at the Other Ones Foundation, because we take a clinical approach when it's necessary, but that's not the main approach. The main approach is to be in fellowship with people, to love on people, to recognize them as our brothers and sisters. And when we kind of really first got our programming off the ground at the Other Ones Foundation, the main thing that we were doing was going and taking people out in vans and going and cleaning up parks, and paying people a dignified wage to do that. And you would see this thing happen in people where they would first come in and they would be hesitant. They wouldn't maybe want to engage in like any kind of other services. They just wanted to get in to get some money so that they could go buy dope and then go back to the streets. And then you see these groups of guys and gals that get together every day, and they start to be a support network for each other. And then you've got this guy who's come in, who has been in the program now for 4 or 5 months. And he's like, now, he's been working with a case manager. Now he's got, a driver's license for the first time in 20 years. And then you've got this other guy who's like, I don't want to deal with any of this case management bullshit. I just want to get in here and get my money. Mm-hmm. And they start to see that, well, this isn't a joke. Like, these guys are actually here to actually help us do this stuff. And they see the results in other people. And that is, it's completely unquantifiable, because there's a magic to it. And there's just a magic in fellowship. And I think it's crucially important that we all kind of, anybody that wants to kind of get off the sidelines on this issue, really remember that you would be, and people say this all the time, and it may sound hokey, but 100%, when you get to that red light and there's a guy standing there holding a sign, I don't care if you give him money. I do when I can. I don't, but I know that people have opinions about that. I don't want to rile anybody up and say give him money or don't give him money, but there's no reason to, fake to check around in the change drawer. We've all done it, I know. But if you take a minute and you just acknowledge a person and you just give them a little smile and a wave, that goes a long way. Go even a step further, roll down your window and say hello and ask how they're doing. You'd be amazed how often, and I would say at least 60% of the time, the person's going to say, I so appreciate you just saying something to me.
Wow.
Yep.
I think, just to touch on what you said, really, it just really hit me. The resources are a means to an end, aren't they? I mean, the supportive services are everything for the organizations that we partner with at Homemade. I mean, that's we invest in projects that offer supportive services, but it is that community that is the real game changer for people, because you can get a license, you can have all those things, which getting a license is not easy, and you definitely need help to get it, because it can be like a very multi-step process, and you can't get a job without an ID, and all those things, they all stack up. But yeah, that community piece is, I think, will forever be the glue.
Yeah.
And one of the things, Chris, that you touched on, and I get asked just personally often, well, how do you know Eddie? How do you know Shorty? These are two of the homeless gentlemen that live by our house. And I said, well, it's really simple. When you're walking, ask them, what's your name?
Yeah.
My name's Natalie. How are you doing today? So it is so simplistic.
Well, you do that to
Right.
somebody walking down the street, one of your neighbors.
Yeah.
I mean, we all do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
when
but
it's
do we
somebody
all do
that,
it?
there's
But do we all do it? I mean, I'm not trying to challenge or anything, but I feel like there is a deeper societal and like just because you know what? I notice in my neighborhood, some of my neighbors going to meet them at the mailbox. They don't want to talk. They want to avert,
It's like the elevator, right?
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you get on the elevator. And so
I guess it depends on the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I guess it does
But
depend on
sure.
the neighborhood, but I mean, that is like a thing, is that it's not just we are, there's a lot of people that are just living in isolation, and there is no more isolated way to live than to be, on the streets and to be homeless.
Yeah,
And
spot
so
on. But it's really that simple to me. And I hear you. There are so many, I think we're a minority, whereas what our goal is understanding the paths, right, to and from homelessness, but also the small parts of it. And you touched on that, Chris and Melissa. Have the conversation. Stop and say hi.
Say hello.
You don't have to do it every time, but Chris, you're spot on. When people approach and ask that question, what I find is that that's a teachable moment, and that person's heart is open and they're asking the question. So, for me personally, I have the responsibility to say, hey, it's so simple. Just ask. What's your name? Who are how was
or
your
just
day?
tell somebody to have a
How'd you
good day. I
sleep?
mean, I've
Yeah.
heard that before, that just by asking a question, that's great. But sometimes you get in that mode where you're, hey, how's it going? What's up? As opposed
think
to
that-
actually saying, hey, I hope you're having a good day.
Yeah.
I think the challenge and the problem with a lot of people in our society is that they think that if they say something, they're going to have to do something.
Yes.
Mhm.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so in our program, the way that after we do case management and walk through a couple of steps with families, we ask them, hey, now our next step is to partner you with the local church, because that's what we do, right? We're a network of churches, and we know that if we just say, hey, here's $10,000, go have fun, that nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. You're going to blow, I'd blow $10,000 real quick, And so we do partner them with a local church or with a small group in a church, with an individual or family in a church to walk them through those next stages. And we say it's typically going to be about a month to 6 months. And the idea and the goal is that they'd be able to connect to that community within the local church. And so when we look at a disaster, winter storm's one thing, but then an apartment complex fire is another.
Sure.
And we may have, 17, 18 families that are displaced. Well, that's what we do during the year usually. And typically it's about 100 families a year, that we'd be able to walk through some steps and connect them with the local church. Now, the thing is about our program, basically we can help fund. We have a thrift store. We're about to open another one where they can get some clothes. They can, get some resources. We can help pay for an apartment for a while, things like that. But if it's just, hey, here's your apartment, here's your clothes. Hey, have a great day. There's no next step. And so
not
that's
imposing
why-
your view. I think that's something I struggle with sometimes, even in the world of housing, is just that, like, I feel like everybody should be in safe and stable housing, but that's my idea of a home. And I think it's being able to, I think you guys are the full spectrum of housing. Like you're, Derick, very much working with people at risk of homelessness. And then Chris, you're very every day working with people experiencing it, living it at the moment. And it's, I guess, respecting where they are in their lives and what their desires are. And I guess, how do you go about assessing that, Chris, on the ground, or both of you? I mean, and making sure people, I guess, have access to the resources they need and are living, I guess, in a healthy, stable situation.
Can I say something
Yeah,
real quick?
sure, go ahead.
There's a lot of incredible organizations that help kind of stir the pot, if you will, of relationship. I know we've worked with an organization called CARES Apartment Ministry. Have you ever heard of CARES before? And basically they have somebody that lives in an apartment complex, kind of helps with events and, just checking on neighbors and encouraging people to communicate, right? I think of foundation communities, they have different apartment complexes around, and the way that they actually keep people in their apartment is that they have community events. They do things where people interact. And so I think that's, when I think about people that are struggling with homelessness of no community, I just see this deep, dark circle of, just rounding the toilet bowl of life, because what is the purpose? Why do I exist? I mean, I'll tell you, I've got a family member that's very close that, she went through being an incredible musician in Austin back in the day, playing South by, all these great things, and just went through a hard time of where, she had no relationship in her life and turned to drugs, did all these things. She was homeless, lived in LA on Skid Row for a while, and it's like, what is it that we can do? I mean, honestly, this is, I look back at those times. I'm like, man, I should have been in her life more, but really, the thing that I could have done best is look for somebody who could actually speak into her life, and so that's where I think that we can all be more, aware, is going, man, who can I help this person connect to? Maybe it is Chris's organization. Maybe it is this other program that's working, things like that. And let me support that, by the way, because our organization, our mortgage company, right, has some money that we want to help the community. And so that's what I would encourage everybody on this call to do, is like, hey, find the things that are working and actually making a difference and plug into those things. Go serve, make a contribution, go to their gala or whatever they do for the year to raise money.
And just connecting,
help it be better. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the person in your family. I mean, you wish you could have done more. And I think maybe that's something, I think we've probably all said that at times in our lives. And it seems to be kind of a recurring theme, is don't make those assumptions that person's okay, or maybe don't make assumptions that you have to fix the problem for them. Just listen. And then, hopefully you can find ways to connect with those supportive services that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And let me just say something real quick about supportive services, because I think that there's this misconception that you need to be a social worker, or you need to have, a master's degree in this or that to go out and help somebody. And it's not rocket surgery. I mean, it really, it's doing a lot of the things that we all do for ourselves every day. Right. And so, here's big challenge time is, if you want to go and help somebody, a single person, go and just maybe help navigate them through some of these processes that we all have to do all the time. Like getting an ID. Yeah. This is a simple thing. Like, you got to go get your ID renewed. You got to go get, it's kind of a pain because you got to go fill out a form and you got to give them $5 or whatever. And it's like this, sort of tedious thing that you do. But like for people who are living on the streets, man, that is a awful lot of work. And so you get to know somebody. And I think this is just to kind of like, drive this home. I mean, a little bit more is, that's the thing. I think that people really, you want to have your eyes open, is just go get to know somebody. Like you said, you've got Shorty that knows somebody who and that I'm sure getting to know him has made a tremendous difference in the way that you generally feel about people who are living this experience. Or maybe you already felt that way. I don't know, but it makes a big difference, because, recognizing somebody's humanity first and foremost does go a long way. Right. So then the thing is this stuff is not that hard, and it really isn't. It's just that we have a more concentrated, like I have people, like we have people on our staff whose whole job is this thing case management that means something different to every person who enters into that program. Everybody has their own life and has their own needs, but like, you know, again, it's not that complicated, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's something that we, you know, because this isn't like, you know, solving this issue that we have thousands of people who are experiencing this extreme level of, you know, or this most extreme manifestation of poverty. It's all of ours. It's not up to the Other Ones Foundation to fix it. It's not up to ADRN to fix it. It's not up to city council to fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not up to Mobile Loaves and Fishes to fix it. It's up to all of us that we all go and get involved in some way. And look, a really good way to do that. You asked this question before, I didn't get to answer it, but you know, surely go ahead and go to toofound.org, make a financial donation. We're about to kick off a $2.5 million capital campaign to put a bunch of people inside structures. And that certainly is helpful. But if I had, you know, I would rather go and find the money from, you know, 4 or 5 big donors and for the most part with people, if I was given the choice of them giving the Other Ones Foundation $100 or going out and meeting somebody and opening up their heart to that person and recognizing that person's humanity, I would choose the latter every single time.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was going to say real quick, you know, and my grandpa told me this one time, y'all probably heard it as well. We're walking along the beach and you see all these starfish on the beach and he leans over and grabs one and throws it into the water. Right. And it's like, well, that didn't make much of a difference. Well, it made a difference to that one. Right. And so I would encourage anybody. I mean, if you're thinking, well, there's not much that I could really do to make a difference. Well, just help one person. You know, just have one conversation and see where it leads, you know? And so, man, I love what you're doing. I love that this conversation. I believe that anybody that's watching right now can make a difference, can make a contribution. You know, it's like there's incredible things happening out there that you can be a part of. Get out of your shell and be a part of something that's changing a life.
Well, and I think take your God-given talents and really put them to the test, right? I mean, that's why I love Homemade. That's what attracted me to our mission in the very beginning, was that it took this very complex issue, but it said to this group of professionals that you're going to help solve this problem by doing what you do best every day, and that's building housing. You know, it's like you can take something that you're good at and just apply it, whether it be conversation. I mean, one of my questions was going to be like, beyond floods and, you know, everything like fires, what are the other disasters? But it feels like the real disaster is just disconnection. Yeah.
Which has been kind of a recurring theme in our previous conversations as well.
Every single
and if we get nothing out of it, it's just learn to reconnect.
Hey, I can tell you one of the things that I always share with people when I used to lead a lot of teams, things like that. And here's a scripture for you. Galatians 6:2 says, bear each other's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ. You know, hey, how about we just bear each other's burdens a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And how often do we actually do that? You know, and you're absolutely right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's become so clear that, you know, 45 minutes just was not anywhere near enough time, you know, and maybe what we can do is some kind of a town hall discussion at the end of all this and get everybody together. You know, job. Exactly. I mean, it's just really cool because, you know, our previous discussion, you know, there's so many parallels here and, you know, I think both of you have such tremendous, you know, thought leadership and would love to continue this discussion, but sincerely appreciate the time here with us today.
I can't wait to build with you. So both of you.
I
love the plug.
Yes, that's right.
Right. That's the beautiful thing about this is you both have shared, you know, go out there, make a difference in one life. Well, you're both actively making a difference in many lives. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. And I want to leave up with kind of a parting thought here that, you know, is if anybody wants to manifest their inner advocate, you know, I love this, and I've seen this is not the first place that this with here is not the first place I've seen it, but I love this, there seems to be a cottage industry popping up around getting builders to get into this, and it's a beautiful thing, because we talk about homelessness as this very, 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 very complex problem. But I think what the reality is that we have created a very, very, very complex homelessness response system.
Yes,
Mm.
very true.
Amen.
And that is maybe, we just need to build places for people to live in.
Mhm.
And that is the only way forward on solving this thing. So we need to be brave
Yep.
in our political activism. And, we have to be, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on politically. I don't care if you are part of Take Back Austin, or if you're part of Homes Not Handcuffs. We all want to see the same thing, which is people not living on the street. So come on with it.
Yep.
Come on with it.
Come on.
Let's
All
do
right.
it. Let's get the housing built. We can certainly, homelessness, obviously, like I said earlier, is a different thing, but we can solve houselessness. We just need to go out and build it.
Mhm.
So thank you very much for indulging me, and for having us. It's been a real joy.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was the perfect way to
Mic
end it.
drop.
Just
Yeah,
go
that's
out
right.
and build
Yes.
it. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to future conversations.